They say your first home is where your story begins. For me, it was where the facade of family loyalty collapsed and where my revenge quietly started. My name is Clarissa Reed. I'm 32, financially independent, and I've spent almost a decade climbing the corporate banking ladder in Denver. The view from my apartment window stretches across the city skyline, a daily reminder of how far I've come from the suffocating suburb where I grew up. 6 months ago, I made a pivot. Corporate banking was slowly killing me, one spreadsheet at a time. Financial planning offered more freedom, more humanity. The only catch? A temporary drop in income while I built my client base. The apartment around me represents everything I've sacrificed for. No vacations, no designer, anything. Packed lunches for 9 years, 3 different roommates with varying degrees of nightmarish habits. All so I could own these walls. 2 bedrooms, high floor, concierge, security system. Mine. I painted the walls myself. Pale green, the color of new growth. I installed bookshelves that stretch from floor to ceiling. I hunted down vintage light fixtures at estate sales. This place is the first thing I ever owned that no one could take from me. Or so I thought. The numbers make sense, I told my friend Zoe over coffee last week. If I rent the apartment for exactly 1 year, it'll cover my mortgage and HOA fees, plus give me a cushion while I build my practice. Zoe nodded, dark curls bouncing. And my spare room is yours for as long as you need. Half the normal rent, friends and family discount. I didn't tell my mother or sister about this plan. I couldn't. Not after what happened last year. My mother, Marjorie, had called on a Tuesday afternoon. "Sweetie, I have a tiny favor to ask. My friend Janet from church. Her daughter's going through a terrible divorce. She needs somewhere to stay for a few months. I told her your spare bedroom would be perfect." She hadn't asked if it was okay. She'd told her friend it was happening. My apartment, my sanctuary, offered up without my permission. That was the day I realized keeping certain boundaries required secrecy in my family. Finding the right tenants took 23 interviews, 17 background checks, and countless hours scrutinizing employment verifications. When Dylan McCarthy and Annabelle Cho walked through my door, something clicked. Dylan, a software developer with steady eyes and a quiet demeanor. Annabelle, an ER nurse whose calm voice never seemed to waver. They were saving for their own place. A 1-year lease matched their timeline perfectly. "These built-ins are gorgeous," Annabelle had said, running her fingers along my bookshelves. Not just polite interest, genuine appreciation for the space I'd created. "Did you choose this green?" Dylan asked. "It's perfect with the morning light." I felt something rare with them. Trust. They would care for my home the way I did. The lease was signed on a Thursday, move-in set for Saturday, April 15th. I prepared a welcome basket with local coffee beans, a handwritten note, and a printed guide to everything from the closest grocery stores to the quirks of the dishwasher. The night before they moved in, I cleaned every surface almost ceremoniously. A proper goodbye. That evening, I paused at the kitchen counter where a single photo stood in a silver frame, my college graduation. Just me, alone. My mind flashed back to that day. While I received a small check and a pat on the back, my sister Sabrina had been gifted a car for her birthday the week before. "You're the strong one," my mother always said. "Sabrina needs more help." That mantra had shaped our entire lives. The self-sufficient daughter versus the fragile one. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Hey, sweetie, how's the new job going? Are you still staying with Zoe? Give me a call later." I stared at it, feeling that familiar twinge. Something was off. I decided not to reply immediately, an instinct telling me to keep my cards close. As I packed my overnight bag, a thought nagged at me. My spare key was missing. I always kept it in a locked drawer in my desk, but it wasn't there anymore. I assumed I must have given it to Zoe during the initial move-out preparations and shrugged it off. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. I picked up coffee for Dylan and Annabelle, meeting them outside my building at 9:50. "Ready for the final walkthrough?" I asked, balancing the carrier of drinks as we rode the elevator up. We turned the corner to my hallway, and I stopped cold. My front door was slightly ajar. The welcome home basket I'd left on the entry table was gone, and from inside, I could hear the faint sound of laughter. I held up my hand, signaling Dylan and Annabelle to wait. Then I pushed the door open. Your stomach drops when you realize something's wrong, but it hits differently when it's your own sister on your couch, holding your coffee mug. Sabrina was sprawled across my sofa, feet bare, scrolling through TikTok as if she were in her own living room. Her fiancé Brent stood at my kitchen counter, humming while using my French press. Several boxes and suitcases lined the wall near my coat closet. The apartment smelled of takeout and lavender candles. Not my brand, not my scent. I froze in the doorway. "What the hell is going on?" Sabrina looked up lazily, as if I was the intruder. "Oh hey, surprise." She stretched like a cat. "Mom said you weren't using the place." Brent waved awkwardly from the kitchen. "We just needed somewhere to crash until the wedding. Thanks so much for this, Claire." My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. I turned to Dylan and Annabelle, who were watching from the hallway with wide eyes. "Could you give me a moment, please?" I asked them. "I need to sort something out." They stepped back, exchanging worried glances. "Should we call someone?" Annabelle whispered to Dylan. "Is this a break-in?" I closed the door partway and turned back to my sister. "How did you get in here?" Sabrina smirked. "Mom had a spare key. She said it was fine." The realization hit me. "You changed the lock?" "Well, yeah, for safety," she replied, examining her manicure. "Can't be too careful in the city, right?" I pulled out my phone and opened my smart lock app. My code no longer worked. They had completely overridden my access to my own apartment. Looking around, I noticed they'd already rearranged my furniture. The reading chair I loved had been pushed into a corner to make room for Sabrina's yoga mat. My refrigerator was stocked with their groceries. On the entryway table sat a stack of wedding RSVPs, with my address as the return address. "We ended our lease last week," Sabrina explained, as if this made perfect sense. "Mom said you were at Zoe's and not using this place. This worked out perfectly." I took a deep breath. "I have tenants arriving today. They've signed a lease. They've paid rent." Brent at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Can't you delay them a bit? It's just a few months." "A few months?" I opened my USPS dashboard on my phone and discovered a mail forwarding request had been submitted in my name, to the same address. They weren't planning to leave. On my kitchen counter, I found one of their wedding invitations. My address was printed as the return address. Brent must have noticed my expression because he immediately held up his phone, showing me a job application with my apartment listed as his current residence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a hostile takeover. "Excuse me for a minute," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. I locked myself in my bedroom, the one space they hadn't fully invaded yet, and called Rowan, my college friend who'd become a real estate attorney. "They what?" Rowan's voice rose in disbelief as I explained. "That's illegal. That's real estate fraud. They changed the locks?" "Document everything, Clarissa. Take photos, screenshots, everything." When I stepped back into the hallway, Dylan and Annabelle were whispering to each other, clearly uncomfortable. "I mean, this seems messy," Dylan said, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe we should just look elsewhere." I approached them, keeping my voice calm. "I promise this will be resolved. If it isn't fixed by noon, I'll reimburse your moving truck cost." They exchanged glances but nodded reluctantly. Back inside, I confronted Sabrina again. "There's a signed lease. There's legal paperwork. I may need to involve the police. Sabrina scoffed. You're really going to call the cops on your baby sister? Brent stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. Maybe we can talk this out. It doesn't have to get ugly. As if on cue, my phone rang. Sabrina quickly put it on speaker before I could answer. Clarissa? My mother's voice filled the room. I thought the place was sitting empty. Why can't you just let them stay until after the wedding? Family comes first. The familiar pressure built in my chest, the expectation that I would bend, accommodate, sacrifice. But not this time. You had no right, I said clearly. This is my property. This isn't up for debate. I opened my building's resident app and felt my blood run cold. A security alert was logged. Key fob 2B was duplicated without authorization. Lock override occurred at 2:14 a.m. Friday. I stepped into the living room, holding up my phone so they could see the alert. You broke in, I said, my voice steady. You didn't just move in, you broke in. Sabrina narrowed her eyes, leaning forward on the couch. My couch, as if accepting a challenge. So what are you going to do, Clarissa? She asked, her voice soft but venomous. Evict your own family? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what I'd been missing for years. This wasn't about a place to stay. This wasn't about convenience or miscommunication. This was about ownership. About erasing me from my own life and replacing it with hers. About taking what I had built and claiming it as if the work, the sacrifice, had been nothing. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Sometimes trespassing isn't breaking a window. It's breaking your trust, erasing your name, and daring you to take it back. I retreated to my bedroom again, heart pounding against my ribs. I needed to think, to plan. This wasn't just about today. This was about years of being treated like a resource rather than a person. First, I started documenting everything. I took photos of their boxes, the mail with different names, the wedding RSVPs. I captured screenshots of the USPS forwarding notification and recorded a short voice memo summarizing the sequence of events. Then I texted Rowan. Need legal options. They're not budging. My phone rang within 10 minutes. I've been thinking about your situation, Rowan said without preamble. This is more than just family drama, Clarissa. Key duplication, lock changes without consent, submitting mail forwarding in your name. These are serious violations. How serious? I asked, pressing my forehead against the cool wall. Unlawful entry and residential trespass for starters. The change lock escalates it to unauthorized occupancy, and that USPS mail forwarding plus the employment application with your address, that's potential fraud. I closed my eyes. What should I do? Stay calm, document everything, avoid physical confrontation, and start creating a paper trail. When I returned to the living room, Sabrina was unpacking a vanity mirror, placing it on my dining table as if staking a claim. We're repainting the guest room, she announced, not looking up. That beige is depressing. I kept my voice firm. You are not staying here. You need to be out by today. Sabrina laughed, a sound I'd heard so many times before when she'd gotten her way. You can't evict someone in a day. Pretty sure that's illegal. Brent took me aside, his voice lowered. Look, Clarissa, I know this is awkward. I was uncomfortable with the whole thing, to be honest. He glanced nervously at Sabrina. She convinced me you had agreed to it. I even suggested calling you directly, but she said that would just make you uptight. I studied his face. You're grown adults. You gave up your place. You don't get to hijack mine. When I checked on Dylan and Annabelle in the hallway, they were pacing, clearly reaching the limit of their patience. We're losing daylight, Annabelle said, checking her watch. Our moving truck is waiting downstairs. We may have to walk. Dylan nodded. We need certainty. We're not looking for drama. I felt a stab of panic. 2 more hours. Please. I promise full reimbursement if it doesn't resolve. They reluctantly agreed, but I could see their trust fading. I needed to act faster. I headed downstairs and requested a meeting with Mr. Sutton, the building manager. In his office, I explained the situation in detail. "Let me check the security logs," he said, typing rapidly. He frowned at his screen. The digital log shows override access via an emergency code, likely used with a copied key fob. He looked up. The original key fob was signed out to a Marjorie Reed years ago for emergency use. My mother. Of course. Mr. Sutton pulled a file from his desk. "There's something else you should see." He showed me a scanned letter from the HOA addressed to Brent Dalton and Sabrina Blake, residents of Unit 2B. They submitted their names to the tenant registry earlier this week, he explained, via fax. Earlier this week. This wasn't spontaneous. This was calculated. My phone rang again, my mother calling a second time. I put it on speaker. "Clarissa, you're being ridiculous," Marjorie began. "You've always had more than her. Let her have this. You're doing fine. Don't be petty. This isn't about ownership. It's about support." I listened, feeling strangely detached. "You gave her my life as a hand-me-down," I finally said, my voice emotionless. As I hung up, a text from Rowan appeared. "Drafted a notice to vacate for unauthorized occupancy. You can serve it immediately. Get a witness." I asked Mr. Sutton if he would serve as my witness. He agreed. I printed the notice in the business center downstairs, aware that the clock was ticking, less than 1 hour before the moving truck deadline. When I returned to the apartment, I handed the legal document to Sabrina and Brent. Sabrina read it and scoffed. "This isn't real. I took business law. This is performative." I met her gaze steadily. "Refuse to leave," and the next paper comes from the sheriff's office. Something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, but it vanished quickly. Then Brent's phone dinged. He checked it and froze. Wordlessly, he held it up for Sabrina to see. "HOA just emailed me," he said. "They're launching an investigation for fraudulent tenant registration. They want us to explain by Monday." Sabrina's face transformed, confusion melting into fury. She turned to me, eyes blazing. "You think you can outplay me in my own family?" Her words hung in the air, revealing the truth at last. In her mind, this was a game, and I was merely a piece on her board. "This isn't your family," I said quietly. "It's our family, and this," I gestured around the apartment, "is my home, not your backup plan." I pulled out my phone and called Rowan again, putting her on speaker. "Rowan, can you confirm for everyone here what are the legal consequences if they refuse to leave?" Rowan's voice was clear and professional. "Since they entered without authorization, changed locks without permission, and registered as tenants fraudulently, they can be charged with criminal trespass and potentially identity fraud. The police can remove them immediately." I watched Sabrina's expression harden. She wasn't going to back down easily. But neither was I. "I've spent my whole life accommodating you," I told her. "Making myself smaller so you could be bigger. Giving up pieces of myself so you could feel whole. But not this time." I pointed to the door. "Not my home." Brent shifted uncomfortably. "Sabrina, maybe we should—" "Shut up," she snapped. Then she smiled at me, the same smile she'd used since childhood when she thought she had the upper hand. "You know Mom will never forgive you for this, right?" And that's when I realized, for the first time in my life, I didn't care. They say blood is thicker than water, but ink on a contract? That's thicker than all of it, especially when it's notarized. I took a deep breath, centering myself. This wasn't just about reclaiming my apartment anymore. It was about finally ending the cycle of being used as backup support for my family. I needed to stay focused, even as my heart hammered in my chest. I called Rowan again for final confirmation. The HOA investigation strengthens your position, she said firmly. If they don't leave, you can file an immediate unlawful detainer complaint. And yes, police involvement is valid due to the lock tampering and false identity usage. I'm prepared to do that, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. 20 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and my mother stepped into the hallway. She walked into my apartment without knocking, as if she owned the place. Her eyes darted around, taking in the standoff before landing on me. "You're really doing this?" she demanded. "To your own sister?" I didn't answer immediately, watching as she moved closer, her voice dropping to that familiar accusatory tone. "You always did like seeing her squirm. Is this about control, Clarissa?" I met her gaze evenly. This is about ownership. Mine. The word hung in the air between us, simple but powerful. Mine. A concept I'd never been allowed to have in my family. Mr. Sutton returned with a printed log of key fob access history and lock override data. He addressed my mother and sister directly, his voice carrying the weight of building authority. "You are not on the lease, not authorized by management, and did not follow protocol," he stated. "This violates your daughter's lease and building regulations. Legal action is being considered." My mother's face flushed. "This is a family matter." "No," Mr. Sutton interrupted. "This is a legal matter involving property rights and security violations." The front door opened again and Dylan and Annabelle stepped back into the apartment. Annabelle checked her watch pointedly. "Clarissa, we really can't wait anymore. We're losing our moving team." I felt the pressure mounting. 15 more minutes, please." To my surprise, Brent began gathering some of their smaller bags. "I'll start taking things down," he said quietly. Sabrina shot him a venomous look. "Don't you dare." I opened my laptop and turned it so everyone could see the screen. "Let me show you what I've documented." I clicked through the evidence methodically. Screenshots of Sabrina's fake tenant registration, USPS mail forwarding confirmation in my name. Photos of my missing welcome basket, now sitting on Sabrina's makeshift coffee table. "You moved into my life," I said quietly. "Not just my apartment." My phone chimed with a message from Rowan. I opened the attachment, a utility name transfer request using my address, submitted last week in Brent's name. "I didn't do that," Brent said quickly, looking genuinely confused. "Sabrina, did you? You two were going to phase me out of my own lease." I cut in, turning the phone so they could see. "Erase me completely." My mother shook her head. "You're overreacting." "No," I said firmly. "For once in my life, I'm reacting exactly as I should." I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency police line while maintaining eye contact with Sabrina. "You have 20 minutes to start packing," I told her as the line rang, "or I'm filing for forcible removal." "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "If I miss my legal obligation to these tenants," I continued calmly, "I'll lose more than money. I'll lose my name." Sabrina stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. The sound echoed through the apartment like a punctuation mark. Brent hesitated, then continued gathering their bags. "She can stay and deal with the cops. I'm not ruining my record for this." My mother stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "I never thought you'd be so cold." "Setting boundaries isn't cold," I replied. "It's necessary." Mr. Sutton stepped forward. "I'll have security assist if needed." I turned to Dylan and Annabelle, who had been watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. "If you stay," I said, "I'll knock $200 off your first month's rent." Annabelle nodded, a new respect evident in her expression. "We'll stay." The bedroom door flew open. Sabrina emerged, but not in defeat. Her eyes were dry, furious, not broken. She was holding something in her hands, my framed college diploma. She dropped it on the floor deliberately. The glass shattered, shards skittering across the hardwood. "If I go down," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "you're going down with me." A smirk spread across her face as she pulled out her phone. "Let's see what Mom says when the cops show up." Before I could respond, she did something I never expected. She dialed 911 herself. "Hello? Yes, I need to report harassment. My sister is trying to illegally evict me from my residence." Her eyes never left mine as she spoke. "Yes, I've been living here. She's threatening me." "I feel unsafe." My mother gasped. Brent shook his head in disbelief. "She's lying," I said to the room, but kept my composure. I texted Rowan immediately. "Sabrina called 911, claiming harassment and illegal eviction. Need immediate advice." Rowan's response came quickly. "Stay calm. You have documentation, building management as witness. Police will sort it out based on evidence, not emotion." I glanced at Mr. Sutton, who nodded reassuringly. "The building's security footage will confirm the timeline and unauthorized access," he said. "Truth is on your side." Dylan stepped forward. "We've been waiting to move in for weeks. We have a signed lease. We can verify that." My mother sank onto the couch, her face pale. "Sabrina, what have you done?" But Sabrina was still on the phone, performing distress, dabbing at non-existent tears. "Yes, officer. I'll wait right here. Thank you so much." As she hung up, she looked at me triumphantly. "Two can play at this game." I felt strangely calm. "This isn't a game, Sabrina, it's my life." I turned to Mr. Sutton. "Please compile all security footage from the past week showing who entered this apartment and when, and I need copies of all HOA communications regarding unauthorized registration." He nodded and stepped out. The room fell silent. Brent continued packing, no longer looking at Sabrina. My mother stared at her hands. Dylan and Annabelle whispered to each other by the door. And I stood in the center of my apartment, my home, knowing that the next hour would redefine not just my living situation, but my entire relationship with my family. Sabrina finally broke the silence. "They'll believe me, you know. I've always been more convincing." I smiled slightly. "Maybe. But I have something better than charm." "What's that?" she asked, her voice mocking. "The truth," I said. "And paperwork. Lots and lots of paperwork." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face, and I knew then that I had already won. The worst part isn't the betrayal. It's watching the people who betrayed you act like you're the one out of line. I could hear the sirens before they arrived. The distant wail grew closer, each second stretching into eternity as we waited in tense silence. I used those moments to document everything, taking photos of the broken picture frame, of Sabrina's scattered belongings, of the changed lock. I texted everything to Rowan in real time. "The police will ask for your side first," Rowan texted back. "Stay calm, stick to facts, and let your evidence speak for itself." Mr. Sutton returned with a file folder. "I've printed the security logs and the unauthorized key fob usage report," he said quietly. Sabrina paced near the window, rehearsing her story under her breath. My mother sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The confidence she'd shown earlier had evaporated, replaced by a nervous energy I'd never seen in her before. 15 minutes after Sabrina's call, two uniformed officers, a tall woman with cropped hair and a younger man with broad shoulders, knocked on the door. Sabrina rushed to answer it before I could move. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. Tears appeared on command, streaking her mascara. "I don't feel safe here." The female officer introduced herself as Officer Chen. Her partner was Officer Donovan. They asked to speak with everyone individually, starting with Sabrina since she had made the call. I watched as she led them to the kitchen, gesturing dramatically as she spoke. I could make out fragments: invited to stay, changed her mind, threatening us, my wedding. Officer Chen then asked to speak with me alone. We stepped into my bedroom, the only space that still felt like mine. Miss Yi, Reed, I understand there's a dispute about who has the right to be here, she began. I nodded and calmly presented my evidence, one piece at a time. Here's the signed lease agreement with Dylan and Annabelle. I handed her the document. Today is their move-in date, and here's the deposit receipt. I showed her the HOA email about the fraudulent registration, the USPS mail forwarding screenshot, and Mr. Sutton's footage log of unauthorized key usage. And these photos show the changed lock and my unreturned welcome basket, which was taken from the entry table. Officer Chen reviewed everything carefully. You own this property outright? Yes, I've owned it for 3 years. My name is on the deed, the mortgage, and all utility accounts. She nodded, making notes. And you never gave permission for your sister and her fiancé to move in? Never. I had no idea they were here until I arrived with my tenants this morning. After interviewing everyone, the officers conferred in the hallway. When they returned, Officer Chen addressed the room. Based on the documentation and statements, we've determined that Ms. Clarissa Reed is the legal owner and sole authorized resident of this property. Ms. Blake and Mr. Sirkwa Dalton have no tenancy rights and are currently trespassing. Sabrina's mouth fell open. That's ridiculous. I'm her sister. Family relationship doesn't establish tenancy rights, Officer Donovan explained. You need to vacate the premises immediately. Failure to do so may result in criminal charges. Brent immediately grabbed their largest suitcase. We're leaving, he said firmly. Right now. Sabrina's performance shifted from victim to aggressor in an instant. I'll sue you for emotional trauma, she hissed at me. This will cost you everything. Ma'am, Officer Chen warned, I suggest you calm down and focus on gathering your belongings. Sabrina wasn't listening. This is why no one in the family likes you, she shouted. You're cold. You're selfish. You've always been this way. I looked at her, feeling oddly detached from her rage. I'm not here to be liked, I said evenly. I'm here to protect what I've built. Ma'am, Officer Donovan stepped between us. I need you to lower your voice. Continuing this behavior could result in a citation for disorderly conduct. Brent was already heading for the door, pulling 2 suitcases and balancing a box. He paused only briefly to look at Sabrina. We'll talk later. You lied to me. About everything. I noticed several neighbors had emerged from their apartments, drawn by the commotion. They stood in the hallway, watching the scene unfold with undisguised curiosity. And there, frozen at the elevator, stood my mother, staring in disbelief at the police escorting her youngest daughter out of my apartment. As Sabrina grabbed her last bag, I made a decision. I stepped forward and spoke clearly, ensuring everyone could hear me: the police, Mr. Sutton, the neighbors, and my mother. I've already booked 3 nights at the Crawford Hotel downtown, I said. Your name's at the front desk. Sabrina blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by this unexpected gesture. But this door, I continued, this chapter? Closed. She didn't respond. Her face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Without another word, she stormed past me, brushing my shoulder roughly as she left. Once they were gone, Mr. Sutton helped me relock the apartment and reset all the smart codes. Officer Chen gave me her card. Call if they try to return, she said, and consider filing a restraining order if you feel it's necessary. After the officers left, I stood alone in the center of my apartment. The silence was deafening. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. I ran my hand along the countertop, my countertop, and felt a sense of reclamation wash over me. I texted Dylan and Annabelle. All clear, ready for walkthrough. They arrived minutes later, cautious but visibly relieved. "I'm so sorry about all of this," I began, but Annabelle shook her head. "We've dealt with shady landlords before," she said. "But honestly, you just earned our trust." Dylan nodded in agreement. "The way you handled that showed integrity. We appreciate it." I walked them through everything again: the appliances, the thermostat, the quirks of the old pipes. This time, the tour had a sense of finality, of rightness. They signed the final paperwork, and I handed over the keys. "It's yours now," I said. "For the next year, at least." As I gathered the last of my personal items, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not just because I'd won this battle, but because I'd finally recognized a pattern I could break. I closed the door behind me, hearing the satisfying click of the lock. As I waited for the elevator, my phone vibrated with a text notification. It was from Brent. "Hey, I've left Sabrina. We're postponing the wedding. Just thought you should know." She lied about more than just the apartment. I stared at the screen, a cold realization washing over me. What else could she have lied about? The elevator doors opened, but I didn't step inside immediately. I stood there, wondering how deep this web of deception really went, and whether I was finally ready to unravel it completely. The end of a war isn't silence. It's what you hear afterward. The absence of manipulation. The return of your own voice. I returned to Zoe's apartment that evening, mentally and emotionally drained. She asked what happened, but I couldn't find the words to explain. Not yet. I simply shook my head and retreated to the guest room, her guest room, where I would be staying for the next year. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading texts, lease terms, HOA rules, confirming to myself that I hadn't overreacted, that I had been right to stand my ground. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, it hit me. For the first time in my life, I had defended myself without guilt. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. In the days that followed, the ripples of my decision spread outward. Sabrina went completely silent. No texts, no calls, not even passive-aggressive social media posts. It was as if she'd vanished. My mother called twice, leaving voicemails that evolved from angry to confused to vaguely remorseful. I listened to each one but didn't call back. Not yet. I needed space to process what had happened. A week after the eviction, Brent texted me again. "Clarissa, I found something. I think you need to see it." He sent screenshots of emails and documents that made my stomach turn. Sabrina had created a fake email account in my name months earlier, using it to get out of their old lease. She had forged my signature on utility forms. My identity hadn't just been borrowed, it had been stolen. I called Rowan immediately. "This is identity fraud," she said after reviewing the evidence. "You have grounds to press criminal charges if you want to." I hesitated. I don't know if I want to go that far. "Pressing charges doesn't make you cold," Rowan said gently. "It means you're done playing safe." After careful consideration, I decided to file a civil suit but not criminal charges. I sought reimbursement for the lock change, identity misuse, and false mail forwarding. It was a middle path, firm enough to establish consequences but not so severe that it would permanently destroy what remained of our relationship. "I can always escalate later if she retaliates," I told Rowan. "Balanced, firm, clean." She agreed. "I support this decision." Over the next few weeks, I visited my apartment regularly to check on Dylan and Annabelle. They were caring for the space beautifully. They'd even fixed a loose cabinet hinge on their own. During one visit, I bought fresh flowers for the windowsill. It was the first time I'd done that in months. 3 weeks after the eviction, my mother invited me to lunch. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. She looked older somehow, sitting at the corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. We exchanged awkward pleasantries before she finally broached the subject. I enabled her, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. All these years. I told myself she needed me more, but I see now what that cost you. I didn't gloat or lecture. I simply listened. Then I said, this was never about the apartment. It was about being heard. We parted with a quiet understanding, not a dramatic hug or tearful reconciliation. Real change is slow, built on actions rather than promises. That evening, I changed my phone's lock screen to a photo of my apartment taken during golden hour, the light streaming through the windows, illuminating the space I had created. Then I opened my laptop and began looking at real estate listings again. Not for another place to live, but for an investment property. I was ready to build something new, as an owner, not just a survivor. 1 month after the eviction, a handwritten letter arrived in the mail. Sabrina's familiar looping script filled the page. I'm still angry, she wrote, but maybe I needed you to draw a line so I could see where I crossed it. You don't have to forgive me. But I had to say it. I put the letter in a drawer without responding. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, justice doesn't mean revenge. It means protecting the space you built when no one else would. I closed the notebook and turned to my laptop, checking my investment portfolio. The numbers looked good. Steady growth. Smart choices. My life was moving forward. Weeks later, I walked past my old apartment building on my way to meet a client. I glanced up, seeing the lights on in my unit. Through the window, I could make out Dylan and Annabelle hosting a small dinner with friends. They were laughing, creating their own memories in a space that had once been my sanctuary. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing anything by letting go. I took a deep breath, smiled to myself, and walked on. My story didn't end with vengeance. It ended with agency, clarity, and a life I built and protected. Sometimes it takes losing everything, peace, privacy, even your own front door, to find out where your real home begins, inside your boundaries.